You got to be what we call a thinking shooter. So they need smart people. It's not about just shooting people. It's more than that. That's what you see in the movies, but it's definitely more than that. It's about engaging in the population and building rapport, finding common ground, that kind of thing. So.
Welcome to Hawaii Real, everybody. I have with me today a Hawaii SEAL, Rey Baviera. Ray, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. You're the first Navy SEAL that we've had.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you for bringing me on board and to just talk.
Yeah, man. I mean, you've got some great stories. We were talking off camera about where you came from, how you started, and you're actually born in the Philippines.
I was born in the Philippines, and my mom moved here roughly when I was about a year old.
Yeah.
She moved back.
Yeah, so she's from Hawaii?
No, she's actually from Bakersfield. That's where my family's from, along with West Covina. But so she came back, she landed in Hawaii, and she remained here, never left, basically. I mean, she left island from time to time, but...
So Navy SEAL, what school did you go to? Because that's important in Hawaii, right?
Well, yeah. Well, I graduated from Lelehua, go Mules, right? So in 92, I already gave my age away, but yeah, 92... Lelehua. I lived in Whitmore Village is what we called it. Not, Whitmore Village, but Whitmore Village. So
Whitmore,
like
Whitmore. Okay.
Yeah. It's a village just a little bit more north of, where Nick Tams is, the naval communication base out there.
Yeah, you drive by Whitmore Village when you're heading out to North Shore and stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, I lived there.
So that's your hood. Yeah.
That was my hood. I took my wife out there. She was like, "You lived here?" I'm like, "Yeah." She goes, "Looks like a third world country." I'm like, yeah, actually,
it's in the middle of pineapple fields and stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
So what got you into the Navy SEALs?
Well, I mean, it's kind of a longer story than when we kind of talk off. I became a SEAL about 4 years after being active duty. I was in the Navy for about 4.5 years, and it was something that was there. I said, let me give it a shot. This is pre 9/11.
Oh, okay.
So pre 9/11, 99, I think, if I can't remember. Actually sooner than that. So I said, let me give it a shot. I'm about to get out of the Navy anyway. This Navy thing's not for me. It was a cultural thing. It was huge culture. Like I was a little bit more wild as a kid and just kind of doing my own thing. And having everyone tell me what to do at every given time was just not for me. But so I wanted to give the SEAL shot people were talking about. I'm like, I'll just go check it out. It's how different can it be? I used to surf, go to Hawaii, down to the North Shore, this, that, and the other. So I gave it a shot. First time up, it just wasn't for me. I said, nah, this is not for me. So I just decided to leave. And I
inside, you were in BUDS?
Correct. I applied for BUDS. I actually injured myself the first time. I wasn't well prepared. It's a marathon, if you will, right? It's not something that's just going to happen. So it's a 6-month training program, and it's just a kick in the nuts, if you will, the whole time. Yeah. And a lot of running. There's a lot of running. I wasn't prepared for the type of running, which was on soft sand while I was there. And I had a femoral stress fracture because of it. So they rolled me to a couple classes back. I said, you know what? I got rolled from my original class. I don't think I want to be here anymore. I want to be with my original class. So I decided to leave the program we call Drop on Request. And from there, I transitioned out. I basically became a civilian after that. And I was just a reservist. And then 2 years later, I decided to go back, primarily because I was telling myself, I was with my wife at the time. I got married, and it was like, okay, I didn't really give the program a real shot. I just was there. I said, this time I want to give it a shot, see where I really fall on this pecking order. So I reapplied in 99. So I actually went the first time back in 96, 97, excuse me. And 99 is when I went back.
Yeah.
I went back as a reservist.
I didn't know you could do that.
You can, and then you have to be active duty.
If you get through it, you go active duty?
That's correct.
Oh, wow.
You go active duty. And so I went back and pretty much made it about 2 to 3 weeks before graduation. And I got dropped from training. It's a little bit more involved in that.
Mm-hmm.
I got dropped from training for weapons practical out on San Clemente Island. BUDS is broken into 3 phases.
Mm-hmm.
You got the first phase, which is just a total gut check to see if you have what it takes to endure. There's no rhyme or reason, it's just to beat you.
And that's all the physical activity that you see on, in the movies and stuff like that, going through BUDS.
Correct.
Okay.
So it's just, sitting in the water, freezing, it was miserable.
Mm-hmm.
I probably went into hypothermia for sure 2 times that they pulled me out, and a couple other times just mild hypothermia where it's like, all right, just keep on going. Or what do you want to do? Right? Do you want to keep on going, or do you want to just quit? I said, I'm going to keep on going. Mm-hmm. I'm going to stay here until I die, basically.
Yeah.
Through the program. So that being said, people have died in the program. Mm-hmm. So so I just pushed forward, and even though it sucked miserably. And then after you finish that, you got the notorious Hell Week, they call it, right? That's the stuff that you see on TV. Mm-hmm. It's up 5.5 days. Before it was about 2 hours of sleep, maybe, So you're just, first 3 days, you're just doing all the evolution. And after that, you just become sort of robotic. You're just doing things automatically. You're just miserable. You're not even thinking about it anymore. You're just like, I just got to make it to the next meal. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, mid-rats. Mid-rats is we get fed at midnight.
Yeah, so I've heard that with BUDS, is that guys that have been through the program have said that you don't focus on making it through the entire program. You have to focus on making it to your next meal. And you get to that meal, make it to the next one, and then make it to the next one. Just break it down like that, because it is so hard and challenging.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Because if you start looking at the finish line, you just won't make it.
Yeah.
It's just so far off. And, at the moment when you're suffering, right, it seems forever, right? So you have to look at it in just these little moments, and just take your mind to a happy place somewhere. I would say I'm not a master at it, but I got pretty good at escapism, like leaving myself there and my mind just focusing on something else, and or the evolution. Make sure I pass the evolution, because there's time evolutions that you have to pass, and there's evolutions it's just a gut check. Yeah, it just sucks. That's the whole program. So, and then what most people don't see is you go into the second phase, which is the dive phase. That's where you learn, open circuit, closed circuit. And there's another thing we call Dregger Hell Week. The Dregger is a enclosed apparatus, underwater breathing apparatus. And that is miserable.
That's just enclosed so the bubbles don't come out when you're breathing.
Right. So because you're breathing pure O2, what happens is not only that, you're getting stronger at this point, because you're building, they're not beating you. Now they're training you, but it still sucks, So you're getting stronger. You're eating 3 to 4 times a day. You're not expending all that energy. Your muscles are starting to grow, and you're breathing oxygen. Pure oxygen helps you get stronger too. So your times are getting faster, in terms of like our evolutionary times, runs, swims, and stuff like that. And of course, we're focusing on different things. We're no longer getting beat, but it's still miserable when we look at Dregger Hell Week. We call it Dregger Hell Week,
okay.
And that's miserable because you're in the water 3 times a day, 2 to 3 times a day, just diving, and it's miserable.
And it's not warm water.
It's not warm water. No, not at all. So San Diego water is about, I think the average is around 60 degrees.
That's fucking cold.
All year, not all year long. In the winter, it's colder.
Like to be in it all the time, yeah.
Maybe a 3-degree drop, maybe. Under is like 57, maybe. It's miserable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's meant to be miserable, right? It's not meant for everybody to get through.
This is true. I wish they had it here in Hawaii, right? I think the birthplace of the SEAL teams was here. Well, UDT,
right?
The underwater demolition team was I think Bellows or Maui or something like that.
During World War II.
Correct.
The frogmen.
Right.
Right.
So it's nice warm water. Would have been nice if it was here.
So, so you get through buds. That time you got through? Or no, that time you said you got out of the class.
Yeah, I actually got rolled. So I made it to third phase, the final phase.
Okay.
And actually, kind of going back a little bit, my brother had died when I was in Hell Week of that class in '99. So he had died when I was going through Hell Week.
Oh, no.
So I got pulled out of Hell Week, and they sent me home basically because my wife was just hysterical. And I was like, hey, can I stay at least in this class, finish Hell Week, then get rolled? Because it was just miserable. You know, now Hell Week kind of moves between the weeks. But back then when I went, it was the 5th week, right? It was the 5th week. And it was just, you're just getting beat like a whole month. You're just getting beat day in, day out to that 5th week. Back then I was like, hey, I was telling the people in charge, the training officer, is there any way I can just make it to Wednesday or Thursday and then get rolled forward? And like, no. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Because now you're going to have to do it all over again.
All over again. Right. So they sent me home. I was kind of sad about it. I was a little upset about it. But what can I do? Right. So they sent me home. I went home. My wife was hysterical. I called my mom. I let her know. She was just broken. He was my older brother. And I called my grandmother. And that's really my only really 2 immediate family members that I knew. So they were kind of broken about it. And then I called the coroner. My brother died in Washington State in Bremerton. And I called the coroner. Luckily for me, my wife had told the coroner what I was doing. She's like, oh, my husband's in SEAL training, this, that, the other. So when I called him, he goes, hey, look, there's nothing you can do. And he was a former SF guy, Green Beret, because Washington State has a lot of Green Berets there. And he goes, there's nothing you can do. Can you come on the weekend? And at least sign some papers, this, that, and the other. I'm like, yes, I could do that. He goes, in the meantime, just go back to your training. There's nothing you can do. So immediately I called the basic training officer. I'm like, hey, can I come back to training? There's nothing you can do. Here's a coroner's number. Talk to him, this, that, and the other. And by the way, I got home around 9 p.m. at night. And when I already called them, they said, okay, stand by. So about 1 o'clock in the morning, my wife wakes me up. I already took a warm shower, changed my clothes, and I was in bed sleeping at this point. I was been up for the last two and a half days. And I get this phone call and they said, hey, Baviera. I'm like, yes. They were like, are you delusional? I'm like, no, not at all. Like, return to training. I'm like, oh, crap. So I'm coming out of bed,
Why are they asking if you're delusional? Just from the information that you've given them from the coroner?
Well, you'd be delusional because you're up for about 2.5 days. So you start to see things.
Oh, okay.
Right. I said, no, I'm not delusional. I wasn't. I had like a few hours of sleep at this point. Right. So I got dressed, went back to training.
Nice.
Yeah. That night. So I didn't miss much training, maybe 5 hours, maybe 4 or 5 hours of training.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I went back and I went all the way through until the 3rd phase, which is the final phase of training. And, I would think about my brother, what he did, this, that, and the other, because my brother committed suicide.
Oh.
And I would think about what was going on. It was just an emotional roller coaster for me through training. So that was pretty tough. And, that's pretty tough. And I actually got rolled from that class. I was in my original class was 225. These are the numbers of classes. So I was in 225. Then I got rolled to 226 to do 3rd phase all over again. And it was at that point that I got dropped about 2 weeks out from graduation.
And was it because of, you said you were just thinking about what your brother did?
I lost focus. Yeah. Like my brother was just coming to surface. I didn't have a chance to really mourn him at the time. So, because I went right back into training and it was nonstop. I kept going. And then I got his effects, and I read a letter, how they have their letter, and it affected me. Yeah. So, and he had a son. Well, he has a son who was probably about 2 years old at the time. And what affected me the most is when he said, "Hey, take care of my son for me." And that's when I just broke.
Yeah.
You know, like, how dare you? You know, as if he was here. Like, how dare you?
Right. Because he gave up.
Yeah.
And
like,
here you are going through buds, going through SEAL training, not giving up, not giving up, not giving up. Yeah.
Sure. So, you know, and that was kind of what happened. And over the years, I mean, well, I got dropped, obviously. And shortly after, that's when I got orders to go to Italy. And I went to Italy with my wife, and we picked up, and we're like, and I was kind of like, done. I don't want anything to do with this program.
Right. Because it's the second time you've been through it.
Right. I was like done. I had no intent to ever going back. None. For me, I felt like, hey, I came here to prove what I wanted to prove. Can I make it? I was too out. Did I graduate? No. Was I 2 weeks out from graduation? Sure. Was there more to come in those next 10 days? Absolutely. Right. So in my mind, I was done. So both ways, I have done the program. I could pretty much complete, you know, because the last week's it's like an administrative week. You start cleaning up. It's not that you're still a student, you're still getting beat like a student. And so, and the other side was, yeah, I'm out of here. So I got new orders, went to Italy, like I said.
So you're still in the military when you're heading off to Italy?
Yeah. So I decided to re-enlist because I'm like, yeah, you know what? I want to stay in the Navy at this point. So I stayed in the Navy. So.
And that brought you to Italy, where you were military police, you were saying?
Yeah. So shortly after, before all that, I was kind of going through, buzz is rough on the body. So I was 16 months of temporary light duty because my knees, my back, my neck, they're all shot, you know? So I was going to physical therapy, this, that, and the other. And then I got orders. Then I went to the military, like almost like an academy, which was in Virginia Beach. And then from there, I got orders to Italy.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you're in Italy, military police officer. How do you go back to doing the SEAL thing?
It's interesting because when you go through training, SEAL training, a lot of the buds duds is what they'll call them, the ones that don't make it. What happens is they'll push them out to security detachments or security units, wherever the Navy needs them. And so I went to Italy, and when I went to Italy, I actually didn't tell anyone I went to buds. I just went there as, you know, a second class, which is an E5 in the Navy. And there's a lot of master arms, you know, former students who went, and they would talk about buds this, buds that, buds this, buds that. But their story would normally end at Hell Week. No one would talk past Hell Week because most of them never made it past Hell Week for whatever reason, whether they quit. I mean, I quit once. So I was like, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. And so they would talk about that. And I wouldn't say anything. And then one day there's this guy named Chris Morano, God bless his soul. He was singing the second phase, the dive phase songs, which there's each phase, you have certain song, like cadence songs or whatever songs you're singing. And you can only sing them while you're in that phase. So he started singing these songs, and I was working in the armory. You know, I would issue out, you know, our service pistols. And I looked at him like, hey man, did you go to buds? He goes, yeah. I'm like, what class were you? So I asked him what class he was in. Because at this point, he's the only one I encountered was past Hell Week. He went into second phase. So he goes, yeah, I went to second phase. I'm like, oh, right on, man. Good for you. He goes, and at that point, that's when I opened up.
Yeah.
I said,
he must have known because you knew the song he was singing.
He asked me, he goes, what about you? I'm like, yeah, I made it to second phase. As a matter of fact, I went to third phase. And he was, what? You know, he was like taken aback. So finally, him and I became really good friends. And he was planning on going back. You know, he went his first time, didn't make it the first time, and he wanted to go back. So him and I would talk, this, that, and the other, share a little, you know, our own little war stories at Buds, right? And he was like, hey, Ray, you should go back with me. I'm like, nah, I'm good, man. I'm good. I don't need that in my life. This is already post 9/11, by the way.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it wasn't right away. It didn't happen right away, like where I wanted to go back, because I was still jaded because I got dropped. Because the thing with buds, it's a personality thing. It's about fit. Do you have what it takes, not just physically and mentally, but do you have what it takes to be part of the boys?
Yeah.
Right. So I was like, nah, I don't want to be part of it. This, that, and the other. You know, I got dropped for it's a dumb reason. You know, it became a personality issue, which I didn't mention, but it was a very personality issue. And because I got a little cocky when I was in second phase. And there's this thing that they say, I don't mean to go back too far back. The instructors would always say, in the unlikely event that you make it to this phase or graduate or whatever, in the unlikely event. And mind you, I was in second phase in a class, and one of the instructors goes, in the unlikely event you make it to third phase. And I was under my breath, which I thought was under my breath. I said, I'll make it to third phase. And the instructor goes, Baviera, what did you say? I said, and I was like, nothing. And integrity is a huge thing. And he goes, do you want an integrity violation? I said, and then I said, I will make it to third phase. And because of that, I singled myself out, and I got beat all day for that. I didn't go to
keep your mouth shut.
Yeah,
man.
I just couldn't. I was like, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? And we already knew there was instructors in the third phase that were known for dropping at least one student. They just had to find a reason to do it. This is pre 9/11. There was no need for everyone to graduate at this point. So they could drop whoever they want.
Right.
So this guy, I'm not going to give his name out, but this one instructor, there's two of them. And they singled me out because of that. Because of that, they're now testing to see where they can. And if, as a student, you're going to always find something wrong with them. Always. You're a student, you know, you're not at perfection, right? You're not polished. You're still rough. You're still trying to figure things out, this, that, and the other. So I had several safety violations that they just pinged me with. I was like, that's ridiculous. But anyway, maybe it came out of my attitude also. Anyway, so I was sort of jaded, and it wasn't right away that he convinced me. And later on, there was another guy decided to go back to Buds. He was well respected. So by the way, well, there's two more that applied for it, and they got accepted to go Buds. So total 4 guys from my command. Only one out of the 4 was Chris Morano, who had made it past Hell Week. The other 3 have not. So Morano kept pestering, getting on top of me, like, hey man, do you want to stand here, get gate guard, this, that, patrol, just, do reports on parking or whatever violations. And I started really thinking about it, and I went home one night and I told my wife about it, because, my wife was part of it when I went the first and second time. Right. And she was like, whatever you want, whatever's going to make you happy. If you want to go back, that's fine. So I said, okay. So I went back. I can't remember when. At some point, I said, all right, Chris, I'm going to apply. So I applied. I got denied, actually, when I applied the first time. In Italy, it was like, nope, you're not going back. Because it's like an application. You put it in, you put this application in to your HR, what we call a detailer. And they're like, no, you already been to Buds. You don't need to go back. This, that, you're senior enlisted at E5. I was only E5. I was not really senior. So we're going to give other people an opportunity. I just couldn't take no for an answer. If I took no for an answer, my life to where it was at that day, I probably would have never been there, right? If I took all the no's, because I was told no many times before that. I was like, no, I'm going to find another way. Yeah. So I actually reached out to the SEAL recruiters via email, and I said, hey, this is so-and-so, blah, blah. Can I get an endorsement letter from you to attend Buds? I went to Buds at this time, I made it this far last time, etc. And maybe a few days later, a response came back and says, is this the Baviera that I put through training? And his name was Mike, and they called him the White Devil. Right? He was a miserable instructor. He he was our proctor. When I was in going my second time when I was going in, he proctors your class. Make sure, you know, as a proctor, you're supposed to support the class, give them what they need, etc. You know, motivate them. Not this one, not this instructor. We started with, in my buzz class 225, we started with about 200 and about a little over 200. He by himself dwindled it down to about 20, maybe 30.
Jesus.
Before Hell Week. So we went into Hell Week with 25 guys. We lost one guy.
So we narrowed it down to the right 20.
Right.
The right 19.
Correct. And through the whole process, you know, he knew I was this, that, and the other. Of course, my brother died, you know, this, that. So I like, yes, this is the Baviera. He goes, yeah, whatever you need, I will write you an endorsement. And he wrote me an endorsement. I reapplied the second time and I got approved. And they're like, you want to go back to BUD/S? You really want to go back to BUD/S? All right, you're leaving in like a month for the next class.
Nice.
That's how they wanted to stick it to me, right? The Navy did. So I went home like, hey, babe, start packing. We got to start packing. We get the movers, this, that, and the other. I got to be there on this day. This was in December.
And then you only have like a month to get your physical fitness into.
Well, I was already kind of running already. It's just what I did. I run swimming. I didn't do much. I was into calisthenics already. So that, yeah, I had to really work on my running more. I wasn't a bad runner. I'm slowed down a little now, but
you were ready for it.
I felt I was ready for it. Okay. So mentally I was ready for it. I think I was, or I thought I was. So we went, and then I went back to training. I got the orders in December of 2001 and 2003, sorry, because I was there for 2 years. And I started training January 2004. It was like that. And all 5 of us went back in the same class. My class was 250 at this time. So 25 classes later from my second class. And I'm the only one that graduated out of all of them. My friend Chris Morano, he went back to second phase. He just got dropped in second phase. That was just kind of thorn in his side. He couldn't get past it. Because, you know, there's dive physics. There's a lot of, contrary to popular belief, it's not just you're a bunch of drones told what to do and go do. You know, you got to be what we call a thinking shooter. So they need smart people. It's not about just shooting people. It's more than that. You know, that's what you see in the movies, but it's definitely more than that. It's about engaging in the population and, you know, building the rapport, finding common ground, that kind of thing. So, yeah, I was up for, and Chris, my friend Chris, earlier I said, God bless his soul, because he got out and he became an Arizona state trooper, and he was killed back in 2009.
Oh man.
Yeah. So, which sucked. Yeah, it was a good friend of mine. So, but yeah, and that's pretty much it. And then I became a SEAL. And by the way, when I was going through this training, a lot of my friends had become instructors at that point from my first classes or my second class. And it was interesting because they didn't know how to treat me. Should I treat Ray as, you know, a peer, or should I treat him as a student?
Gotta treat you as a student. I mean,
well, they did. Okay. They did, but there's many times where they pulled me out of it. Like my class was getting, you know, beat, or they're what we call surf tortured, just laying in the water. I'm sure you've seen photos.
Yeah.
And they're freezing, and they're like, "Hey, Ray, what the heck are you thinking, man, coming back there?" I'm like, "I don't know what I'm doing back. I have no idea." And they're like, "Well, okay, eat this, drink that." I'm like, "Okay, yeah, sure." You know, so thanks. And, you know, they're just poking fun at me, and that I was back there, and I was kind of poking fun at myself to being back there. I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing back here. So
you're Navy SEAL for, you said 17 years?
15
years. So after 15 years, knowing what you know, doing what you've done, would you go back and do it all again? Going through BUD/S 3 times? Yes,
I actually would. It shaped me into a better person than I am. I think I see the world so much more differently than when I saw it when I was in the regular Navy.
How so?
You know, the thing is, the fact of the matter is, there's true evil in this world.
Yes.
And to ignore that blindly, to live more of a apathetic life is just not the way to go around. Mm-hmm. Because there are people who want to hurt you. And we have to put people forward to maintain that line so that, I don't know, for lack of a better term, the hordes are at the gate and you don't want them to breach your gate, to disrupt your comfortable lifestyle.
Right. And
I see the world as, there's loving people all over the world. Like the people I fought Al Qaeda in Iraq. I fought ISIS in Iraq. And I fought the Taliban in Afghanistan and Abu Sayyaf in the Philippines. So, and you're fighting someone who have love for their family.
Interesting.
So they're fathers,
sure,
they're brothers, and they're a contributor to their community. Mm-hmm. And here I am fighting them mm-hmm. for our cause, so. And I totally understand that. I totally embrace that. Hey, you got to do what you got to do, but I got to do what I got to do. And I'm fighting for my cause too, so, and I understand the whole love, but at the same time, there's evil in the world.
Yeah.
And evil needs to be put down in my mind. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So it's probably not a way to like a lot of people want to look at it. However, you can't, it's hard to talk to them, because there's a lot of barriers already in place, language barrier, cultural barriers, just ideological beliefs are already in the way. So, yeah. But
do you see that going on in the country today with things politically?
In our country? This country?
Mm-hmm.
Sure. I mean, you can believe whatever you want. That's the great thing about this country. You can do what you want to the degree, of course. You can say what you want. You can practice what you want. You can believe whatever you want to believe in. So that's the great thing about this country. And I think that the danger in that is if we get too far apart from each other where we just don't want to listen mm-hmm. because you're just so stuck in your belief that everything just doesn't matter outside of that. You just don't want to listen. So that's where the danger, earlier on I said, one of my specialties as a SEAL was a sniper. That's a hard skill.
Yeah.
One of the soft skills I had was, like I said, I worked in intelligence. So I would talk to a lot of, I would interview them. Like I have a Pashtun fighter in front of me talking to him. And I would try to build some rapport, of course, through an interpreter mm-hmm, mm-hmm. and find some common ground. I would actually carry photos of my family with me. I'm like, hey, this is my wife and this is my kid. You have a wife and kid, this, that, and the other. Try to get to know him, try to make him see me as a human being.
Yeah.
Besides this guy who wears this, all kitted up, stripped all that away. I'm just a human, flesh and blood, just like you. Let's talk. What's going on? Mm-hmm. And they start talking. I'm like, I totally understand. If I was in your shoes, I'd do the same thing. It's just, seeing them as human beings rather, because we tend to dehumanize each other a lot.
Yeah. There's a lot of that going on right now here mm-hmm. in the United States. There's a parallel between what you just talked about and, civilians and police. Like we are not seeing each other as human beings all the time. When the fact of the matter is, you take off the uniform, you're a human being, or vice versa. If, what separates a civilian from the police officer? Yeah, training and everything like that. But in many states, like all that's separating them is a piece of metal, that little badge. They have all the same rights and everything else. So.
Sure. And at the end of the day, I'll tell some people, I'm not that special. I'm not special at all. I'm just an average human being. You'd probably see me on the street, not even think twice. I'm very unassuming. I'm shorter, I'm skinny, thin or whatever, but very unassuming. And I'm not going to go out and pretend like I'm better than everyone else. So I think that's a problem too. Everyone is they don't know when to be humble. some humility would be great right about now in this country.
Yes, definitely humility from all peoples here would be would be definitely advantageous to all of humanity. But we'll see. You were talking about off camera about your privilege and how you would like to share your side of that and what you think of privilege. And it's coming out in the news a lot these days, you know, white privilege or having privilege or born, you know, being born with a silver spoon in your mouth. But here you are, you know, skinny Filipino kid from actually born in the Philippines, came to America. And yet you say you do have privilege. Share.
Sure. You know, the thing with privilege, it's not good or bad, right? As soon as you try to isolate them and put them into two categories, hey, it's good or bad, you're already stepping off on the wrong foot. It's good if you use it for good, right? Everyone has privilege. We all do. The fact that we get to live in this country is privilege.
Yeah.
You go to other countries, there's not so much privilege there.
Right.
And if there is, it's a small group of people, very small group. Everyone has privilege in this country. Now, it's bad if you take that privilege and you look down at people, like, look at me, you know, praise me, screw the little people, right? That sort of thing. Rather, you should take your privilege and give back to the community. That's where putting your privilege at check, in my mind. Like, you know, for me, you know, I attended some, actually, you know, I was very fortunate. I joined the military. I was given an opportunity 3 times, right? I became a SEAL, which is elite in the Navy.
Yeah.
And, you know, I went to undergrad in Washington, D.C. to a very exclusive university, which is a National Intelligence University. And then I went to grad school at the American University, also in D.C. So I had those opportunities. Those opportunities were available to me. And it wasn't like the door was shut because I'm brown skinned.
Right.
Right. It was open to me. It was given to me like, hey, you want it? Okay, yeah. Can you just submit this, do this, take the test here, blah, blah, blah. If you do it, then you're good. Right. Did it. And guess what? I no problem. I went to college, you know, actually went to grad school. Who would have thought I would have walked out with a master's degree?
This was all after you had been in the military.
This is during my military career.
Okay.
So I had, you know, in the military, you have a break to, we call it C rotation or C rotation. You're just grinding, right? Your deploy status. And then we have a shore rotation where you have some time off. So during that time, I would chip away at college classes, you know, during my time. And then when I had some time, when I went to shore duty, I decided to go to college full bore. Of course, I owed them time because of that. I owed the military time because of that. And this is kind of interesting because you go back, you know, I go back all the way into 92. When I graduated from Leilua, I actually barely graduated. You know, I was like 1.9 GPA, you know, C's, a lot of C's, maybe a good mix between C's and D's and a couple F's.
So you're just scrambling out of a rural high school in Hawaii.
Right. I barely entered the Navy, barely. You know, I barely passed the battery tests, right? Just by the skin of my teeth because I didn't have a good grasp of math, or my reading was okay, but everything else, comprehension and all the stuff that they're asking in the battery tests. So that's because I didn't put the effort in. I was a bad kid growing up. You know, I've been to Pearl City jail. I've been locked up there before. You know, I said I went to Leilua High School. That's where I finished off. And that's not where I started. I didn't start off in Waihewa. I didn't start off in Whitmore Village. You know, I once lived with my mom when I was much younger, and her boyfriend had broken my leg. I was about 2 years old. So the state of Hawaii took me out of that situation, put me into a foster home, which I thought at that point, those people were my family. So when my mom came around, I'm like, I don't know who you are. So I probably could count the time I lived with my mom in one hand, roughly. And so I moved a lot. I lived in Eva Beach. I lived in Waianae, or Nanakuli. I lived in Waipahu. I lived in Kalihi Valley. So yeah, then like Dole Intermediate, right? So pretty rough school at the time, Cam 4, you know. So that's what I was rolling in at the time. And to survive, especially when I moved to Kalihi Valley, it was about fighting.
Yeah.
You have to fight. Otherwise, if you don't, you're just going to get stretched all over the pavement, you know, because there's a lot of people, that's what they do. They're bored, you know, they want to fight. So I got involved in it, started smoking, doing some drugs. And then, of course, I was in a foster home in Kalihi. And then I ran away because I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I've been to, what's it called? The Boys and Girls Home. And I've been to the detention home many times for shoplifting, for breaking and entering, for assaults, for a lot of things. Fortunately enough, I just got the book thrown at me. Well, not really. I didn't get the book thrown at me. I got my hand slapped. I take that back. Fortunately, I did a lot of community service, but did a lot of time sitting in jail, you know, and at some point, I don't know what happened, but it clicked, like I can't do this anymore. So I was, you know, so I had a pretty rough neighborhood. I mean, I grew up, I got physically beat by my mom's husband. She had remarried. Me and my brother would get beat. He'd come home drunk, just pick us up and throw us across the room.
Jesus.
Yeah, right. So, and you know, at some point, even though it was a short while, we were homeless for a little while, living in a van off of Ala Moana, me, my mom, and my brother. Of course, the state can't let that happen. So they took us out. You know, it was just a mess. It was a mess. So instead of just dwelling on that, you know, I mean, I used, and by the way, growing up, because the path I was taking, I had foster parents tell me, yeah, you're going to end up in prison. Yeah. You're no good. You know, I would hear these things. You know, imagine you're your kid learning. You're still formidable. You know what I'm saying? And you're learning. He's like, all right, that's fine. I guess that's the path I'm going to go on then. Yeah. You know, so my mom wasn't. It's not to belittle my mom, but my mom was doing her own thing. You know, so she did drugs. She'd been in jail, prison for a few years for drugs. You know, I remember going to her house and she's just chopping up cocaine. You know, that kind of stuff.
So how do you even come to the conclusion that you're privileged?
I'm privileged. Not growing up, I'm not privileged.
Okay.
Now I am. You know, I have access to a lot of things. You know, like if I wanted a certain job, I could most certainly get it based on my background here in Hawaii. And I'm reached out to quite often for jobs, right?
People are coming after you for jobs.
Right. They ask me like, hey, we have a job opening. Do you want it?
Interesting.
And I look at it, I'm like, yeah, it's a 40-hour-a-week job. I don't have the time for the commitment right now. I want to give my time to my daughter. She's going to be 6 years old in a few days.
Nice.
So, and that's one of the reasons why I retired early. I retired early because I did 2 rotations and I just understood the importance of me having her father around. Because had I died out there, I would have just been, I probably wouldn't even be a memory for her at that time. She was 8 months.
So young.
She was 8 months when I first deployed for her. And then 16 months when I did my second rotation. And I was like, all right, this is it. So my privilege, I mean, like I said, I have access, to certain jobs, high paying jobs. I quit one here in November just for the sake. I'm like, I don't want to do it anymore. So in a sense, I felt maybe I was a little bit ungrateful. I'm like, hey, you know, I got a good full-time job here in Hawaii, pays very well. You know, I can live, I've never lived in Kailua. That's where my wife wants to live. We were looking either there or even out here, right? And in this side of the island. But my wife liked that side so much.
Yeah.
So I would have never had that opportunity. I probably would have, if I had, it would be me, I'd probably be living in Waipahu. You know, not that Waipahu is bad. I'm just saying that's where it's cheaper to live. cost of living in terms.
So your choices would have been much less. You narrowed down your choices as to where you could live.
So
whereas now you think, yeah, I could live in Kailua, I could live in Hawaii, I could live wherever I want.
Sure. So I'm very fortunate. And, like I said, because I went to some pretty prestigious schools, I still have that network, and I still stay in contact with them, so if I ever, not that I ever will, if I ever decide to move to DC, because that's where I went to grad school, I have a network there in DC, so, yeah. So I have a lot of privileges now. I didn't have privileges then, but I have them now. And they weren't given to me. I had to work for them.
Yes.
So, and I had to prove myself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how it is in the police force, but in the military in general, it's all about merit, right? They don't care what you look like. It's more of, can you do the job?
Right.
Right. And that was my mentality. And it is still today. I'm actually, my wife owns a consulting company. So I'm the CEO of that company. And when we bring people on board, when I give them my rules of the road, I'm like, hey, here's your left and right limits. It's very low, right? 3 things. Don't get me fired. Don't do anything illegal, right? And just do things ethically. Yeah. And you'll be fine. I don't care how you get it done. Just get it done, right? Use your imagination. Just be innovative.
Interesting.
Right. And you'll be amazed at what people will do to get their job done. So long you give them your left and right flanks of ethics.
Stay within these bounds,
right.
But within these bounds, which are pretty wide.
They're pretty wide.
Have at it.
Yeah. And that's how I raised my daughter. I'm like, hey, here's your left and right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care. You want to climb, but I have to be there so that I can at least support you.
Sure.
Right. And then when you get really good at it, then you can do it yourself. It's sort of the way I kind of, it's not the way I grew up. I grew up like very tight, like, hey, you can't do this, you can't do that, this, that, and the other. Very, very strict. So I'm kind of the antithesis of that. I look at it like, nah, I'd rather go do things, but now more legally, mm-hmm. like I used to. There was no guidance for me when I was growing up. I just did it without understanding the consequences. Now I think about the consequences.
But when you hear like on social media and the news and stuff about, people screaming white privilege, there's a lot of white people that don't take advantage of, if there is a so-called advantage of being white, if it's such a privilege and it's such a right. And on the flip side, you have people like yourself, you have a lot of people of color that have made very well-to-do of themselves throughout, the past few decades.
Sure. I was listening to one of your podcasts. I can't remember his name. I think he was Cambodian.
Oh yeah. Bo.
Tattoo.
The tattoo guy.
6 fingers, right?
Yeah.
I'm paraphrasing here. I can't remember verbatim what he said, but he said that he was told early on about investing.
Yes.
And he wanted to be rich like the white man.
Yes.
So that's an interesting thing, because this is actually what I'm actually a doctoral student too. That's why I don't work now. So I look at these social issues, and it sparked my interest what he was saying when he said, he told me to invest, and he went to, money manager or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Someone who does, a financial specialist or whatever.
Went to an investment firm to give him like $40 a month or something.
Right. Yeah. And he said, 40 or whatever. I can give this. And the guy was like, well, I would have took 20. Right. And now he's well-to-do. He's probably a little bit better off than he was before, because in my mind, access is money.
Yeah.
If you have the money, you'll have access, but you don't have to have a whole lot of money. It's like this guy. The real access in my mind is information. It's how you operationalize the information. I can give you all the information, and it means nothing if you don't use it. So, I have this discussion with a lot of people, my wife primarily. I say, I remember growing up and people say, oh, knowledge is power. That's such BS. Knowledge is not power. It's practical knowledge is power. Because what's the point of me knowing that if a plane flies up and it stalls, where the pilot no longer has control? What's great? how does that serve me?
Right. There's a whole slew of knowledge out there that's kind of useless.
There's a lot of useless knowledge for me, at least in my life, right? I want knowledge that I can put into application that'll have a positive effect in my life and my kids' life and my wife's life or my family's life, right? Instead of people are pursuing knowledge that means nothing. You know, it's information is toxic. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, so you have to be able to find the signal in this noise of information, which a lot of people are having a hard time with. So this is where you're talking about privilege. I think privilege, it doesn't matter who you are. If you can find that signal, that right signal, you'll and you don't take your eye off the ball, if you will, right? You'll get to where you're going, right? I'm sure you're going to come off track from time to time, but maintain track of where you want to go and you'll get there.
Yeah. And I'm almost to the point where I'm like, no, everybody that has a smartphone connected to the internet, you are privileged. I mean, none of us had that when we were kids. None of us had access to the deluge of information that you can pull off of Google. And
Absolutely.
Yet, here are, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds able to pull any kind of information off the internet.
Absolutely.
Like watch YouTube and learn how to fix things, learn a new language. Like we didn't have that. Now you do. Everybody does. It's like, guys, the information's there. It's what you do with it. It's the practical knowledge of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, like when I do talk to kids, that's what I try to share with them is like, there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
This is something kind of a SEAL talk, but you probably understand what I'm talking about. Like we have 5, 10, 50 meter targets. Take the target, you can take that's in your immediate line of sight, and focus on that. Don't focus. We're talking about a marathon, right? Life is a marathon. You need to set goals. You need to set these 5, 10, 50 meter goals. That way you can achieve your ultimate outcome, whatever it is.
Yeah. It's like marathon runners. They're not running for the whole marathon. They're running for the next mile, the next mile. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you got to prepare yourself for it.
Yeah.
Speaking of marathons, like I came back at my 2008 deployment. I haven't run a marathon, never ran a marathon. A friend of mine, mutual friend of mine, wife and I, she is like, hey, you want to run a marathon with me? I'm like, absolutely not. I'm like, that's 26.2 miles. I'm not ready for it. So she goes, hey, just come with. So my wife and I, we went over with her to the convention center in San Diego and we went running. And I was like, sign me up. Where did I sign? So I signed on and I'm like, anyway, I ran. Biggest mistake in my life.
All right. Ray, it's been great having you on, man. We're going to have you on again because there's so much more to talk about.
Sure. Yeah. Appreciate it. It was a good time.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Ray, the Hawaii SEAL. And hey, everybody, stay happy, Hawaii.